Welcome back to the Historical Movies podcast. My name is Ross, and in today's episode, I'm joined by guest Imogen Cooper, founder of Yoreflix, a new historical drama and docudrama streaming service that's launching later this year. Imogen, thanks very much for coming on.
No worries. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk a little bit more about Yoreflix and historical movies in general.
Excellent. Well, can you introduce yourself to our audience, your background and your experience and what you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a bit of a whirlwind career in the film and TV industry. I am, as of today, only 27 years old, and I actually was an executive producer from the age of 23. So I scaled a career in the film and TV world pretty fast, was working a lot across the UK and also the US. And it was during that time as an EP that I was becoming increasingly aware of the rise of these niche genre streaming platforms and knew about the likes of Shudder for horror. Crunchyroll obviously is in a bit of a league of its own, but as someone who studied history and grew up watching historical and period dramas and just genuinely loved that genre, thought it was a bit insane that there wasn't a platform dedicated to showcasing historical and period drama when every other specific genre seemed to have their own platform. Seemed unfair and rude. So I decided that I would collect together my experience as an EP, but also in sales and acquisitions before being an EP, and put it into a streaming platform dedicated to the genre that I love, which is historical and period drama. Thought, really, how hard can it be? And here we are 8 months later.
And how hard is it? Quite hard, I imagine.
Hey, I mean, the jury's out. Jury's out. If you asked anyone, to explain my sleeping pattern for the last 8 months, they'd probably tell you that it was quite hard. But it comes with its own, obviously, really exciting elements as well. So I can't complain too much.
So is it your birthday today then? Did
No,
you say?
no.
I thought you said as of today.
No, as of right now.
I see.
As of where I am in my life right now. But no, it's my birthday. It was a month ago, so it wouldn't be off-brand for me to still be celebrating it. But no,
I had the idea that you cleared your birthday schedule to be on the podcast. So anyway, it doesn't make it any less special. So I've got some quick fire questions so we can get to know you a bit better. So firstly, what's your favorite historical movie or series?
So
difficult one, I know.
It's a difficult one in that there are so many that I love, but I do have obvious answers. My favorite actually, it depends how much of a historical movie pedant I'm going to say. That's not the right word semantically, but historical movie prescriptivist you are as to whether this counts or not. But my favorite film, period drama film, is Shakespeare in Love.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a classic. I grew up watching it. I anecdotally have the same thing that I say all the time, and it's because it's true, and that is that there's a hilarious video of me when I'm about 6 years old, and I say, like, Mom, Dad, can I watch Shakespeare in Love with my breakfast? And then you can hear my mother in the background very frantically saying, no, you can't watch that without Mummy. Like, because she had to fast forward all the like raunchier Gwyneth Paltrow scenes. So
yeah, I can imagine.
Exposed to that kind of stuff, probably younger than I should have been, but hey, it stayed in my psyche somewhere. And then series, my all-time favorite series will always be the BBC Robin Hood from, I guess, probably about 2011. It's got Lucy Griffiths in it and Jonas Armstrong and actually Richard Armitage and Keith Allen and all these kind of actors who weren't well known at the time but have gone on to do really exciting things, and that's a great series.
Actually, Robin Hood is something we've yet to cover on the podcast, but there's been some good and bad films about it. So what was the last historical movie or series you watched?
I think it was probably Firebrand, the film on Amazon about Catherine Parr.
Okay, right, yeah.
It's got Alicia Vikander in it, and it's not very often you come across those films actually that have been made anymore. So it was interesting, but it was a TV movie format actually. It was 90 minutes. I'm not quite sure how the commissioning of that worked. It surprised me to see it on Amazon, but it was kind of interesting to see Catherine Parr's story. I guess it's maybe one of the only of Henry VIII's wives that's not had 10,000 films made about her yet. So that's
Yeah.
what they went for.
Yeah, one of the less well-known ones, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you studied history. Did you have an area of expertise, or is there one period that you're fascinated in more than others?
There is definitely there's one particular period of history that I studied, and I could tell you what that is, but then I'd actually have to kill you because it's the period of history that I can't wait to adapt into a epic saga series, and don't want to put it out into the ether lest anyone does it
Okay.
first. But I mean, ballpark. I'm a medieval history girl, so I mostly studied between the 800s and 1200s across Europe, what is now kind of Western Europe, and all the breakdown of the Roman Empire into all the different tribes and post, um, Eastern Byzantium Empire and Holy Roman Empire, those kinds of uh, cultural time periods, specifically the nitty gritty of like religious history during those times, the popes and what was going down. Very, very fascinating history. And that's what I spent
Oh,
time
very interesting. Yeah. I
on.
studied early Christianity when I was at university doing archaeology there, and
Yeah.
it's amazing how different it was to what we have now, and the ideas and everything's very interesting stuff.
We can have a whole conversation about the early phases of
Yeah.
Christianity in Europe then.
Maybe next episode. Yeah. Uh, so Yoreflix then. Yoreflix is this new. It's being released later this year, isn't it? And it's
Yeah.
a streaming service basically for the stuff that we're talking about here, historical media. It's a little bit more than that though. Reading on your website. So tell us what it is exactly. How can people get involved? When is it releasing?
Yeah, so it's releasing in September this year. And every time I say that, it gets closer to September, and I start thinking, oh, that's a bit
Yeah.
scary. But it's releasing in September, and it is a streaming platform for all intents and purposes because we are streaming historical and period drama content, film and television content. But because we're building the software and all the tech ourselves, which has been kind of a whole other process and that was really important to us, we are developing the user interface of the platform as a scrollable time bar, which means that you can scroll along to your favorite periods of time. You can see which historical films, series, etc., have been made about that time period and watch those shows. But aside from that, we're also supporting that then with a wider ecosystem of contextual historical information, as well as podcasts with creatives who have worked on those shows. So you can sort of delve into your favorite historical and period drama programming, as well as then listen to interviews with the people behind them and immediately figure out what was real, what wasn't real, what's been dramatized, what was actually happening at the time. And that's that was an important thing to incorporate into the platform for me because it's a community element as well. When you get a community of people, of fans who like a particular genre of film and television content, they like it because they also like talking about it, right? So you like to be able to engage with what you've watched on forums and see if other people are into the same thing, get recommendations and absorb a little bit more than just streaming the content itself. So that's what we're doing with Yoreflix, and I think it kind of also speaks to the wider media mechanisms happening at the moment, which is that people are leaning towards things like YouTube channels over streaming platforms, and that's because YouTube channels tend to be more personalized to the actual consumer, whereas we're kind of building what is essentially a YouTube channel for historical and period drama with the actual content, associated information, associated content, etc., but in a more traditional like streaming platform tech stack way. So yeah.
Right. Yes, like sort of content silos for the stuff that you're interested in.
Exactly. I've never right, that's great. I'm stealing that. I hope you don't
You can have that one, yeah.
mind. Yeah.
That's great because that makes it kind of unique, doesn't it, in the world of streaming? Not just the historical aspect of it, but the fact you're getting all of this linked stuff together.
Yeah.
So what initially drew you then to that desire to make that platform about historical dramas and movies, and what keeps you passionate about doing that?
I think there's so many different angles to this answer for me, and that's probably why I stay motivated. It's not just like one thing happening in a vacuum. I'm I personally, and I ask a lot of people this question, they tend to have the same answer. Probably subscribe to 3 to 4 different streaming platforms, and most people do the same. Most people often complain about how many subscriptions they're paying for streaming platforms too. Like, it's generally a pretty awful value proposition for consumers at the moment in the streaming world. And so I was personally annoyed that I couldn't just access the kinds of things that I end up watching on repeat anyway, all in one place. Instead of having to always Google, where can I watch this historical period drama? Where can I watch this one? It's always the same genre, but I'm having to cherry pick between different platforms constantly because it's not all curated into one place. So that's, for me personally, it's going to be super useful for my life. It's maybe the best motivation of all. It's going to save me a good amount of money per month. Once I've built the business, obviously. But so there's that element of it. There's also when the idea kind of initially came to me, that stays with me as well, that moment. And that's because I had obviously been working in the US, like I said, but I have a screenwriting agent, and my screenwriting agent, who's really actually, a good friend as well, said to me, well, what kind of thing would you be interested in writing? We were just having a conversation informally. And I said, realistically, the only thing I probably would want to write is historical and period drama. And she said, oh, God, please don't do that to me. There's nowhere for me to pitch it. And
Right, yeah.
I just thought that was insane. I thought that was crazy,
Yeah.
considering that I know there's an audience for this kind of genre of content, having been part of it myself for a long time, that in the industry itself, there was an understanding that historical and period drama was a bit taboo. Like, don't do it. There's not really a home for it. No one's commissioning it. No one's really buying it. And that seemed insane to me. And then I kind of put the puzzle pieces together in my mind of the fact that these niche genre platforms are cultivating a middle ground in the industry, whereby projects are being made that don't have to go to these huge vertically focused streaming platforms or get put to the wayside where no one can even bother because there's no point. And that thought process evolved. And I would now say that actually that's something that motivates me more than anything else, because throughout this process, I've been speaking to creatives in the industry who are dying for platforms like this, just so they can actually make film and TV on a more regular basis than they currently are. And it's kind of unlocked a whole industry process issue that I wasn't expecting to uncover. But now I'm doing a lot of speaking quite publicly about that as well, and how these niche on platforms and how moving into the digital space for film and television is going to benefit not just creatives, but also audiences, consumers. Everything needs to get more personalized so that it doesn't keep being so fragmented and therefore unnecessarily expensive and problematic for everyone. So there's a few different things that have kind of started combining now into one big rant that I have a tendency to go on if at all prompted. So I will leave it there. But yeah, lots of different things feeding into to what keeps me going.
It's very interesting because last week when we had a sort of a chat to set this up, and I was saying that I used to share an office with the founder of Noiser Podcasts, which listeners might know. I think they did The Real Narcos. I think they do something about dictators. Very, very, very good, well produced podcasts. And he was saying for years, he was always going like, I can't believe there's no like place we can for history stuff to go, because it's such a massive market. All of our market research is saying that there's a huge interest in this and there's no specialized location for it. So it does seem to be a whacking great hole in the market that no one's been plugging for a long time. Let's hope that's true anyway.
Yeah. Let's.
That brings me on to another question, just thinking about how you pick stuff to go on the platform, and one thing really interests me, and I'll ask the question through a story that Bryce always tells, that as a history professor, he in his department, they always say at the beginning of the year, okay, right, we've got to teach this number of things about these different periods, and okay, who's going to be doing the English Civil War? And yeah, John will do that, blah blah blah. And when it gets to the Tudors, no one wants. because everyone is so fed up of teaching the Tudors. But it has to be done because the students want to learn about the Tudors, because it's such a interesting, and for particularly in Britain, it's just such a fabric of our historical understanding. It's absolutely ingrained in us, isn't it, when we learn it about school? And it's fascinating, I suppose, except if you've taught it for the last 20 years every year. So my question is, on the back of that, how do you pick stuff, that an audience will be interested in, like the Tudors, against stuff that may be wonderful historical stories that have never been told, that just won't get that same traction because no one's heard of it? How's that conflict? How do you deal with that?
I think it's a really careful balancing act for sure. I think there's also some strategy that comes into that too, because I personally am a really big advocate of stories that have not been told and deserve to be told. That's something I'm just really personally into, because I think historical and period drama is the best way to do that and to showcase those stories through entertainment and to a wider audience, etc., etc. But that's all well and good if there's eyes on that in the first place. So you kind of need some of these tentpole shows. I mean, you could say the same about the Tudors as a TV series, the big BBC series, and that is the kind of a kind of tentpole show that if we have on the platform will draw eyes, because people will watch that over and over and over again. And I don't know, I couldn't tell you the exact numbers, but I would bet some money on it being quite a popular Google search within this fan base of historical and period drama. Where can I currently
Definitely.
readers in
Yeah.
the UK, or X, Y, and Z comparable shows. So it's those shows that you do want to have some of them for sure, because you're also serving an audience of fans that's maybe why they're there in the first place, slash are going to be unsure about the value proposition if those kinds of things aren't on the platform in the first place. But ultimately, the platform won't be entirely taken up by those kinds of shows, because I'm also using it as a platform by which other stories can then get told. So there is absolutely space for that on the platform. Something I find really interesting is, and the something I've been balancing in terms of the content that we're acquiring, is how much can be foreign language period drama. Because especially in the UK, we have a massively diverse culture in the UK. And there are stories from around the world that we don't get taught about in schools, because we have this kind of UK centric gaze, as is the
Yeah.
case in kind of most countries. If you're born and raised there, they'll be focused on that history. Um, and I do think it's important to decentralize history as well, and make sure that we're learning about stories from other parts of the world and other cultures, because that will help us as humans generally to broaden our perspectives. And I personally think that it's quite powerful to hear about stories from other countries and other cultures in their own language, kind of in their own words. That's how I would prefer to absorb that content, rather than watching it with like a Western gaze, or vice versa. Um, and I did get some pushback on that, actually, from various people, saying that really that had to be super limited, because it wasn't the kind of thing people wanted to watch. I got, again, super uncharacteristically a bit political about it, and did push back. But we will be having foreign language period and historical drama on the platform, in a not insubstantial way. But I think that was the trickiest balancing act. Popular, not popular, new, not new, well known, lesser known. It kind of is really up to punter's choice. But the foreign language period and historical drama question was something I had to fight for, to have that on the platform.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I suppose you could look at it that it's another type of brand within history. You've got all this kind of British history, and then you have like the foreign films. I mean, I'm just thinking of how other streaming platforms curate foreign produced media. I'm thinking of Channel 4 always has, it's quite arty farty, but it's great fun. Have all of the like French and Scandinavian murder series, and there's obviously an audience for that, but of course it's like a different. It's interesting, isn't it, where these Venn diagrams of audiences mix, and
Yeah,
it's as we've talked previously, it's very difficult to know within history. There's obviously different areas of history. One thing we always like to poke fun at is our dearly beloved military historians who do take things to excess sometimes. In all good humor, but that's a different kind of audience, isn't it?
yeah,
Really, than the people watching other stuff.
absolutely. Well, I mean, Channel 4 subsumed Walter Presents into their streaming offerings. So that's the kind of, he does foreign language drama, which I think is great. And it's obviously similar principle, but yeah, we won't be splitting anything down as per kind of foreign language or anything like that, because it's all just historical and period drama. I think the less we can, split things between cultural and international differences, the better. It just so happens that's the way it's kind of presented.
I'm obliged to ask you the question that we have come across many, many times on this podcast, and that is, how do you strike a balance? This is maybe thinking more generally here, but how do you strike a balance between historical accuracy and creative storytelling? How do you make sure that even for the products that you pick to go on Yoreflix, how do you make sure that doesn't go too far in either direction?
Oof.
Yeah, it's a tough question. We've spent basically 30 episodes now talking about nothing else on this podcast. Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I get asked the question about like what time periods count most of the time. The balance between historical accuracy and creative storytelling, I think, is slightly trickier to answer because, and I think maybe I was talking about this the other day. I used to be very prescriptive when it came to historical accuracy and historical drama. I loved a high horse. Any opportunity to talk about my horse about historical accuracy, I was on it. And maybe that's because I was studying history at the time. So I was, maybe it's just because I didn't consume as much film and television content generally. I was just watching historical and period drama. I would say I'm more now in the middle ground. I do think that creative storytelling is important as a vehicle to get people to watch historical and period drama in the first place. I think it's a clever way of getting people to learn about history and learn about our past, because it's through the past that we prepare ourselves, hopefully, for a better future, I think. So if you can do that in a way that's presented through entertainment, it just tends to be less abrasive to people, as opposed to saying, well, this is what happened and this is what we should learn from it and this is how it should make you feel. Human beings generally don't respond super well to that. So if creative storytelling is a necessary element through which to portray historical drama and get those stories out to a wider public, then hey, I'm less inclined to get on my high horse about it now.
I'm a big believer in that people, if they're interested, if you spark their curiosity, they will go and look up what the period that they're interested in. I
Mm.
did yesterday, just recorded the episode about Amadeus, about Mozart, which I don't know if you've seen it. Wonderful film from the 80s. But
Mm.
the way that he's presented in that, I was thinking, I've got to find out, as soon as this film ends, I have to find out immediately how true that depiction of Mozart is.
Yeah.
It was like an unstoppable desire to do that. I didn't need to see something that was
Yeah,
100% accurate, because you read up on it yourself anyway.
for sure.
And
Well,
often when you do your own research, actually, you kind of get a little bit closer to the truth than you do watching series.
yeah, absolutely. I mean that's part of the mechanism of your flicks as well, because obviously as someone who does exactly the same thing, I know that that's what people do. So that's
Yeah.
why we will have an article that gets suggested to you after the end of everything that we will have on your flicks that you can stream. So you can literally dive straight into a curated bit of background information on what was true, what wasn't true, etc., etc.
Well, that's great. I was just sadly lamenting the death of the DVD behind the scenes making of documentary last week. The fact that you don't really get that so much anymore. I don't know why, like Netflix don't put that up there. Or you might be interested in the making of. Maybe they don't like making of documentaries anymore.
Maybe not, maybe not. I mean, don't say it to too many people because then Netflix might actually start doing that, and that so we'll talk about that. But yeah, that's the idea. Like with our podcasts that we're running as well, like, to interview the creatives that have worked on the shows. That's more of a kind of behind the scenesy
Mm.
style, supplementary bonus to your flicks too. I think especially with historical and period drama, because that is the first thing that people think. Oh, I wonder how much that was true.
In many ways, especially if you see something that you have a feeling isn't true, the sort of more fantastical the movie is, the more I want to find out the real history.
Yeah.
Where can people listen to the podcast? That's on your flicks, is it, or will be on your flicks when it's
Yeah.
released?
Yeah, the podcast will be on your flicks. I'm currently toying with the idea of putting the ones we've already recorded onto Spotify, so people can have access to them in advance of the podcast of the platform launching. Who knows? Who knows? But they will for sure be part of the Your Flicks subscription, when the platform launches. At the moment, they're currently behind a paywall of early access, but I'm deciding how not. Should I be nicer than that? Who knows?
Well, it's I don't envy your position of trying to work out how do we create a bit of momentum for this, but then have to cover overheads and so on. Yeah, that must be
Yeah,
very challenging.
it's a real life board game, as I'm figuring out. Luckily, I like board games, so it's fine. But it is all
4D chess. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely 4D chess. Yeah, on a different
uh,
scale. Mhm.
So how do we, I say, we broadly in the historical themed media business, I suppose, or people who are interested in
Mm.
historical media, how do we actually get members of the public engaged with history and movies and dramas about history? I noticed that on your website you say that you're creating an opportunity for creators to submit stuff to your flicks.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, I I think there is a distinct lack of bringing together quite a fragmented community of, like you say, history, media lovers, creators, etc., etc. Um, and that's part of the thought process behind the tech of what we're building as well. Because in the same way that people can jump on board a really popular YouTube channel and talk and leave comments and engage with it, and then find their own communities within that, there's not really a way to do that within a streaming platform environment. But actually, because the fans are fans of historical and period drama, you need to be able to stream those in one place and then build out some kind of centralized community from that. So yeah, we're absolutely. I mean, we're currently accepting submissions from producers on the film and TV side. Very open to conversations with any creators working in this space about how we could potentially showcase what they're doing on your flicks, and vice versa. But ultimately, it is really an attempt to bring together a community of people who are all really interested in the same thing. I think historical and period drama can get a bad rep for so many reasons, or the fans of this genre can get a bad rep for a lot of reasons. I think a lot of people assume that like they're so few and far between, and the only people that are really interested in historical period drama are the same people that dress up as knights and go on, like, these medieval reenactments in Hastings. And really, there's kind of a lot more to the fan base for these films and TV shows than just that. But they tend to be
Mm,
not be one target demographic. I get this
yeah.
question all the time, like, "Oh, who's your target demographic?" And I'm like, "Well, anyone who's a fan of historical and period drama." Like, I don't really know how you want me to quantify that. I'm not going to go and interview every single person living in the country and ask them if they're a fan, and therefore they're my target demographic. It's more about finding the core principles of the different target demographics that link them, and then trying to collate them into one place, whereby the primary content is the film and TV that's bringing everyone there in the first place. That's my thought process.
Yeah, I get the feeling that, I mean, a lot of stuff now online is obviously influenced or organized by algorithms, and I just have this feeling that algorithms don't really understand that the audience is so disparate in this kind of
Yeah.
area. I don't
Yeah.
know whether that's true, but I just have that feeling because basically you're creating something that doesn't exist. So
Mm.
I don't think that's it's seemingly that they can't really catch on to it. I don't
Yeah,
know how true that is.
it is true. Obviously, I had to start having an answer to that question about target demographics just to appease everybody. So my way of getting around that was figuring out which, I guess, companies, businesses, communities, etc., had slightly synergistic subscriber bases already, and that tends to be the places where like historical and period dramas were filmed, or anywhere that's already curating collections of historical or literary or cultural artifacts and all of those kinds of things. So once I applied myself to that task, I did start finding some quantifiable metrics, but it is otherwise very disparate. You're right. So it's not something that's like, ask ChatGPT how many fans
Yeah.
of historical and period drama, and now I'm going to have to do that to find out the answer, but I would assume it's going to try and pull it from many different sources and maybe say there isn't a definitive answer at the least. So yeah, you're right.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's correct. Well, hopefully, with what you're doing, and thank you for coming on the podcast. Maybe we can build something that starts that transition, because I think it would be great because there's so many groups online that have got this wonderful connectivity between them, and I definitely think history should be like that. I've thought that for a very long time, and nothing seems to be changing. But maybe now it will be. So thanks very much, Imogen, for your time. So let listeners know then how do you get involved with Yoreflix, and how do we get involved when it comes out?
So currently you can get involved very simply by looking at the website. We're www.yoreflix.com. Nice and easy. And on the website, there's ways to listen to the podcast now, but also just like join the waitlist. That's a lovely thing. If anyone wants to join the waitlist, we're sending out updates about when they can then subscribe. And if any producers want to submit anything, that's all being done through the website currently too. We have our contact form there. I love getting emails from people who are working on niche things or historical and period drama related things in any form. So feel free to drop us a line. And then, we'll be launching the platform itself in September. So all updates will be coming through, newsletters for anyone that's signed up to the waitlist, and /or I'm horrendously all over LinkedIn, Instagram. We're on Instagram, just at Yoreflix again. So that's an easy way to follow what we're doing.
Great, thank you. Yeah, super. Well, thanks very much for coming on, and good luck with everything.
Yeah, great to talk to you.
That's it for this episode of the Historical Movies Podcast. Don't forget to leave us a review on your chosen podcast platform. Spotify and Apple Podcasts make a huge difference to the algorithm. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to leave a comment or a like or subscribe. Thanks very much for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.